I love, love, love imagining something in my head and then twiddling a whole bunch on my computer, but it's still just kind of imaginary. And then it becomes real. And it always kind of surprises me. And that's kind of cool. So this is the Excalibre 15. The panels are being made for it today, so it will be making sound maybe next weekend. And I've done a little mock-up here, just at parts install, to ramp up my excitement level. I don't know if you are similarly excited by such things. Now these knobs are just in place for that shot, really. You give a sense of the balance of things. None of the stuff on the front panel is connected. On this little switch, this dress washer, you can see it doesn't fit in that hole. It will actually be located about here. When the new panel comes in, I'll drill a new hole through the panel and through the chassis right here to mount these. But I love these little dress nuts on these. Just make it look really nice. Similarly, we have a pretty dress nut on the power switch. And if you get one of these with these slotted things, there is a special wrench that fits these, but I just tighten it from the back. It'll have a lock washer there as well on the rear when it's really installed. I'm using a double pole single throw switch that I tested. Of course, you can see that bit of solder. Anyway, that will let me switch to both the hot and neutral, because if I sell one of these to Europe, they have to have the hot and neutral switched. So that Carling switch is about $1.50 more than the single pole, single throw switch that most people use in fenders. And I've got the output jacks on the back temped in place. Let me flip this thing around and show you some more. I've already shown in the previous video the fuse holders will go here and here, and the IC is going to go here. This hole will get covered by the panel, and the third jack hole will be drilled here once the panel arrives, and it'll be equidistant from these two. This will be the 16 ohm output, and these two are the 8 ohm outputs. On the inside, everything is very spacious and clean with lots of room. Room is good. Space is fantastic. Noise levels, one thing making the thing next to it noisy, go exponentially down with distance. So if two things are an eighth of an inch apart, a quarter inch a distance between them more than halves that distance. And I've got most things here at least 3/8 of an inch apart. Now let me show you the preamp wiring. Get this to focus better. All right. Now you'll notice the heater wires are not twisted, and they are not twisted because I have some 12AX7s with connections at 4 and 5 on one side of the heaters and 9 on the other. Then I got the EF86 connecting to the heaters at 4 and 5. And it's not necessary in this amp for two reasons. Number one, I'm approaching all grids away from any heater wires. The only thing coming close to this heater wire is this cathode. Is this focusing right? On this one, none of the wires are coming close to the heater wires. Here, the only thing that's going to come close to that heater is the cathode, which is crossing at right angles. And here, on this one, it's harder to see. The only thing crossing it is a plate at a right angle. It's the grids which are susceptible, and you can see here on this phase inverter, I've got that grid approaching from the other side away from that heater run. So tightly twisted is great, but it's not always necessary. Now on the phase inverter, because it's a long-tailed pair, and the two output tubes, I'm taking advantage of common mode cancellation. So that's the second reason twisting the heaters isn't necessary. Any noise picked up by the stuff going to this tube is exactly the same as the noise picked up by the stuff going to this tube, and the same for the two sides of the phase inverter. But that noise would be the only thing they have in common, and that gets canceled out because they're 180 degrees out of phase with each other. So this is a easy way to install the wiring. It's going to give very quiet results, and I don't have the mass of a twisted pair suspended on that EF86 socket. So that's two reasons. The third, I said two, there are three, is I have the heater's reference to the cathode voltage, which is going to be about 10-11 volts in this amp. Now, it's not the world's best DC elevation, but it does improve the hum rejection because it makes the AC heaters have a lower field. It's just not as strong a field to inject other stuff to begin with. If I were to give this thing a 50 volt supply, it'd be ridiculously negligible. Even with that 10 to 11 volt supply, it'll be drastically lowered. So that's three reasons. You can see here where on this first one, where I was going to mount the choke here, I had some little plastic hole plugs here. They kept falling out. I didn't want to do a glob of glue, so they each get a number 6 screw just for fun. And I looked at all the various ways to plug this hole, and the plastic one just looked kind of crappy, and the metal ones wanted to rattle. So I've ordered an octal plate cover that will be going in there, and it'll look good and be solid. There'll be no hole. No one can stick their finger in and say, "What's that do?" and get electrocuted. Here's the EZ81 wiring and the secondary wiring on the power transformer. Now, on this particular transformer, the B+ center tap, the HT center tap, and the shield of the transformer are internally connected. So these points are equivalent. So I went to ground here, which is also sharing ground with the the reservoir cap negative. See my previous grounding video on that. So this is VA's ground, and it's going to chassis right next to VA, farthest from the input jack. And the only thing tied to that ground is the HT center tap. Now the grounds are going to go from farthest to the input jack to closest. I've got the AC safety ground here. I've got the reservoir cap VA0 here. I've got the VS, the screen connection here, and that'll be the output, the phase inverter, the screen supply, the cathode bias, the volume pot negatives in this circuit, because it's a very simple circuit, and the master volume will all be tied here. Then each preamp stage's cathodes are going to be grounded to lugs here and here, right by their respective inputs, which is also where their filter caps are tied to. Now, you remember I mentioned in the grounding video about Marshalls that they followed the shortest path to ground principle, which is a good principle if you're not sacrificing the sequence of things. With this, I'm able to observe all these things. I have the proper sequence of grounds. Imagine the chassis is a huge bus wire. So input goes to the ground right there. All the stuff in that circuit is grounded to the cathode of that circuit, which then goes to the filter cap negative for that node, which then goes straight to chassis. Same thing's repeated here. So very localized filtering, very short distances both on the positive and the negative for each stage. The screen, phase inverter, and cathode bias circuits are all tied together in the ground, even though this doesn't have a negative effects loop. And it goes right here. And there's a wire going to which will be the ground connection for these 3 output jacks. And over here, sorry about the shaky cam there, this is going to allow me to use an LED, which is going to be mounted right about here, for an indicator bulb rather than incandescent or even neon bulb, which will also allow me to do a half light option when the amp is muted. So when the amp is in play, it will have the full brightness red power light. You flip it to mute, it will still be lit, but it'll be dimmer. So there'll be a visual indication. Hello, little spider. Shall we follow the spider on its journeys? Anyway, as I was saying, if you plug in and say, where'd my sound go, you'll have a pretty good visual indicator that, hey, it's only a half-baked idea. The light bulb has not fully come on. So there's going to be a little switch right here. Play, mute. If it's on mute, the LED, which is going to be right about here, will be a little bit dimmed. So I think that's a nice little touch from a player's perspective. And all the wires from the components to the sockets are short. As I mentioned in the previous video on this amp, on this first prototype, I thought the preamp tube spacing was going to be like it was on the other Mojotone chassis. It is not. So on the subsequent amps built on this model, this is going to be moved over to here, and this is going to be moved over to here, so the wires will be even shorter, because you want very short distances when that's accomplishable. The only thing which is going from this section to the volume pots, this is actually going to go here to a coupling cap switch and then to the volume pot, are these blue wires which are carrying the DC out. And DC, actually it's AC, sorry, it is AC on this one. I was thinking in terms of a Fender. This is only my second cup of coffee and I'm just barely started it. So anyway, just the one wire coming out here, but it's not running by anything else. In fact, on both of them it's passing right past the ground for that stage. So, and it's going to be right up against the chassis the whole length, so there should be no noise there. And then from each volume wiper, I will have a shielded wire going to the two inputs of the phase inverter, and that shielded wiper will be connected to ground, both at plug 1 of the volume pots and to these ground pins here, and that's how that circuit gets grounded. So I'm using not a telescope shield with ground connected at one end, just one end, but a full shield there. I might actually use a 2-conductor with shield cable for that. That way I can have the signal positive from the wiper to here, the signal negative from the ground lug 1 to here, and then also a shield. So we'll have a telescope shield on this, and then it's a matter of whether it's quiet or connected here or here. But that's almost theoretical with these short links. It's almost not necessary. I could almost just run a black wire to there, a black wire to there, and then a green grid wire to here, and a green grid wire to here. I might actually do that in this amp, thinking aloud, because it would cut down the production costs, and I don't think anyone would hear the difference, given how short these distances are, and how there's no noisy circuit for it to run past. You know, if I were to do that, just black wire and green wire, and have them twisted together to right here, it'd have great mechanical strength. I may do that. It's always tempting to do the shielding just to show off your shielding job, etc., but I doubt that's going to be necessary now that I'm seeing it in real life. Stuff on the page has, you know, it's just, you can visualize everything in your head. You can visualize things in drawings and even in very detailed computer drawings. But once you see it, you're like, that ain't nothing. That's not worth shielding. There's just nothing here to be noisy. And these things are 1.5 inches apart. Is that right? 3/8, 3/8, 6/8? No. Sorry, 3/4 of an inch apart. Anyway, that's a huge distance for grids in this case. So anyway, that's enough of me blathering. I'm really pleased with this, and I think when I'm done wiring this up, I will do a separate video on this amp as far as a grounding video. But this gives those of you who are looking at the Excalibre 15 videos, aside from just the grounding videos, a leg up. This should sound glorious.